Father, we thank you for your goodness, your mercies. We thank you that we can trust, rely, depend on you. We thank you, O God, Father, in many cases when you approached a situation where there was brokenness, you used the phrase, take comfort. And I thank you, O God, that the Holy Spirit that you have sent to us, you have given the title of Great Comforter. I thank you, O God, this evening, even as we receive from your daughter, receive from your servant, who is able to share with us, O God, Father, this evening. I pray, Lord, that it will be transformative in no other name but in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, over the last few weeks, in partnership with New Creations Caribbean, the First Church of the Open Bible has been making a specific effort in this area to add value. And we have a very special individual who I know will add great value to you this evening. A topic that I didn't know actually just before I wanted to be sure. And this is something that I think I recently had to face, feeling unprepared of how to really share. I guess in that moment when my mom passed, how to share with my children and how to answer their questions, how to understand what they were feeling based on their age. I have a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old. They would have been 5 and 3 2 years ago. So therapy helped us a lot, and I can probably talk about that later. Getting storybooks that really explained it helped us a lot. That was recommended by some of our therapists. But no further delay, I want you to hear from none other representing our New Creations Caribbean, Mrs. Joseph, that is no stranger to all of us. I'm sure you have heard, I believe in January we would have had a session, and she's coming this evening to bless us. She'll tell you more specific, but really for parents really understanding the grief of their children. So we make that transition now.
And thank you for the invite and the opportunity to share with each one of us today how to help our children grieve. However, today I'm speaking from the perspective of a child initially, and then we will share some ideas as to how that can be done. So, how do we share grief experience with our children? So, let me thank Luke for the welcome, and I invite us to participate in this experience. I thought about the topic of how to help children grieve because I was reflecting on how much, as an adult, how we grieve didn't start as an adult. It started when we were children. And I came from a family of perhaps supporters rather than grievers in a community in which I lived. Going to a funeral was almost like that's something you're supposed to do. It wasn't like an option. However, you were not forced. But I felt at the time as a child I went, but only now as an adult. And I'm looking back and I'm saying, oh, that was pretty cool. That was really a good thing to support people. In fact, there was a time my siblings and I, not understanding that this was somebody trying to support us. There was a lady who, to me, I think she went to every funeral there was in the community. And as children, we are children. So we called her funeral pest because she was there for everyone. I don't think she missed any. And I told myself if I were around when she passed, I wanted to be there simply because at a later stage, I understood the value of support and comfort that we all seek in our time of grief. So I'm going to share today some of the experiences children go through, and I'm going to share some ideas. So until we get our projector on and ready, I'm going to talk about what children wished their parents knew about their grief. And I want to start with mom grief. And the idea of mom grief is not because mom is a bad person, but it's a reminder that mom is with us in our grief, whether they are here physically or not. Sometimes children's grief, it's minimized. And you'll hear expressions, "What you crying for? I'll come and give you something to cry for." Shh, don't start a war. It is not just a toy or any dog. It's my pet. At another time, parents are overprotective, prowling around like a police detective. They really don't want us to cry or to experience pain. Does that sound possible? Really, no. This is the extreme case. The grief detective released me due to the false belief that I was too young to grieve. Of course, when he released me, it was on the advisement of the judge, who declared that if a child is young enough to love, he is old enough to grieve. So we stamped out that mythicism to my relief. Later, I told my mom that sometimes the smallest things take up the largest place in my heart. She smiled, and I'm glad she believed me. Then she gave me an apple tart, and I ran off to play on another slide. Dad grief is another way that we experience and process grief. Well, true to the judge's words, life as a griever was in full swing. Dad grief rocked my world. The first D was the divorce of my dad. It came in full force and set my life on a different course, upside down, sometimes like a maze. Dad was fully present, but emotionally absent. And I cried terribly after his untimely death. I was still living in a daze. This was my first experience of the death of a person. Dad. Not necessarily the dad in person, but the dad in the figurative sense of divorce, absenteeism, and death. Children grieve similar to parents. My mom cried. Like mom, I cried too. I was shocked and angry. I felt grief the most because I was upset with Dad just before he passed. I often wondered if I were to be blamed for his death. Mom was depressed and so was I. Okay, well, that's what the doctor said. Often I cried myself to sleep. I guess Mom continued to weep. Sometime the next morning, I was awakened by the alarming beep, reminding me it was another day to grieve. Sometimes children do grieve similar to their parents. It is also true that children grieve too, but in a different way. My 2-year-old brother was at a different stage. He knew my dad wasn't there, but he didn't understand what death was. My older brother certainly did. One day he declared he was man of the house. How old was he? 10. Daddy wasn't coming back. That's what Mom told me, because death is irreversible. And that's a big word, which really means it's final. He is not coming back. My sister Nancy started wet in bed again and reversed into baby talk. I want my juicy, juicy, please. And of course, I rolled my eyes. My mom talked to her neighbor, who invited us to join Wellness Wednesday session at First Church. I think she joined online, and I'm going to listen to, in this section, how grief impacts children. Children may experience social separation and anxiety, clinging to the remaining adults. So you will wonder why is my daughter, my son clinging to me? They want to sleep in bed with the remaining adult. They do not want to be alone. Sometimes they worry about the other parent dying and feeling responsible for their well-being. Children often worry about their own death, especially when a close friend dies or someone their age. Children experience sibling rivalry, even in death. Because after the death of the quote-unquote favorite sibling, they are left feeling, when is mom is going to show me attention? Mom is still crying and worrying and wishing, though she may not have said it, that I should have died instead of my brother. Imagine how painful that can be for a child. Because they're fighting the death and fighting for the rights with a dead person. Social media also impacts how a child grieves. There is the expression, the FMO, fear of missing out. And so children, especially teens, they log into these websites, they may get help, they may talk to someone, but they do not get the physical presence of a parent or another adult. There's also suicidal ideation. There's a preoccupation with death and perhaps how the loved one dies or died. And you will also see children role-playing and trying to practice or do some of the things they see they do. There's academic decline. That's clear enough for us to understand, and we may see anger issues being manifested. And the attitude, and sometimes parents are like, she wasn't like that before. All of a sudden it's like, duh, and give a shake the head, if you know those expressions, and put hand on the hip and shake the waist. All those kinds of stuff, and you're wondering, what is that? And that's an expression that they sometimes can't understand, but the grief can make them do things like that. Of course, they experience abandonment for the person who died didn't stay, and they feel abandoned by the person who died, and they could get upset and angry with the person who's alive, and they can also be angry with the person who died. So it's a very challenging experience for parents to process that, but just to understand that's what happens to our children at times. Of course, there's a disposition. They would normally walk with their shoulders drooping down and their heads down, and it doesn't seem as if they're happy anymore. They're missing the smile that we would normally see. And there is a disruption of everyday life. Sometimes these reactions that I did talk about are normal, but this is now the time to seek professional help when there is depression, like the young lady talked about before, that a doctor said I was depressed. And that's important, especially when they're losing interest in things that they would have normally been interested in before. They would be playing Dolly House and stuff like that, and like they're not interested in those things anymore. They're not interested in having their favorite meal. So if you imagine your daughter who's like KFC or like ice cream and no longer show interest, then you know definitely something is wrong. Or there's a repeated wanting to join the dead person. There is a prolonged fear of being alone. And those are reminders that's a good time to seek professional help. Now, we can also learn from the games children play. And I picked out a few because those are ones I played as a child, and they will remind us too as to how we can use it to learn about how children grieve. The first one is hide and seek. It's really a game for two or more persons, but imagine your child playing that game by himself or herself. One, it's a reminder there is no one who is seeking their interest, because you hide and you hopefully expect somebody to come and seek you out. This is now the opportunity for parents to seek their child out, finding what's going on, and it's an opportunity for them to bond. If a child is playing the game by himself, then you know something is wrong. There isn't the support that he or she was expecting. We hide and seek, but children are also seeking answers to questions. So it's an opportunity for them to seek answers to the questions they have about death. So it's a game parents can play with their children in the literal sense of the word. But if you have questions that they can ask, so you hide it and they find it and then you give the answers, that's a good way to remind yourself that children mask their grief sometimes to protect us because they don't want mommy to worry about me and stuff. So if you ask me, how you doing today? They give you a bright smile, but they're really not happy. But they're trying to protect the parents. They want mommy to be sad. I don't want daddy to cry. I don't want my other siblings to feel sorry for me and they're crying. If I say I'm sad, everybody else is going to cry in the house. And then the birthday party that we were planning ain't going to happen because I'm not feeling good today. The other one is hopscotch. I don't know how many of us may have played hopscotch before, but children grieve. It's a reminder children grieve in deuces. So they will jump in one little square, as we will say, hop in one, and they hop in one, and they could hop out again. So they could hop into a grief experience, or could feel sad this minute, and they could jump in another moment and feel quite happy as if nothing happened just before. And that's just typical of children. So they grieve in doses, not no long, prolonged period per se. So they could jump from being sad this minute and jump into the next box and feeling happy. And sometimes they could just go and play, or they may go and do homework and stuff like that. Sometimes too, children skip over a square, and it could be a reminder in the grief experience that they could skip over experiences they don't want to have, or a grief feeling that they do not want to talk about. So they jump over it. So you could use that to help you get a sense of what's going on in their space as well. The next one is seesaw. It's a reminder that grief is up and down, as well as the slide. It's a reminder that children are vulnerable. They like to take risks. So in the midst of sadness, they will do some crazy stuff, go and jump up and do some crazy stuff on the slides and things like that. It's a reminder that life goes on for them, and it's important for us to use that to remind ourselves that they're open to new experiences, and parents too can learn from their children as well. And it's a reminder that they seek support. I've been to the play park many times, and you will see dads or moms trying to get the children to go up on the slide. So there's this nice support that we give them to go up, and then we run around to come back when they come back down so that we can catch them. And that's what we need to do in the grief journey as well. We support them when they climb up and make those daring moves, which happens in our grief story. It's up and down, but we're also there when they come down that slide to remind us, or remind them that mom or dad or the adults around them care about them and are supporting them. There's an interesting one that I found very pertinent when we talk about grief, is the one that says, Simon Says. How many of us remember playing that game? Simon Says, jump, and everybody jumps. And if you jump without Simon saying yes, or what you should have done, then you're out of the game. But in this case, let's see how we could help us to use it in the grief journey for a child. It's a reminder that we grieve differently. So a child may not follow the command of the parent, who is quote unquote the Simon in this case. And sometimes parents say, oh, you have to go to the wake, you have to go to the funeral, you have to read the scripture passage, you have to go and get Auntie Mary a hug. And children don't really want to do some of those things in the grief journey. So we need to remember that while they may protest and choose to do opposite of what we suggest, one, it's a reminder that they are different. And two, they shouldn't be ostracized and pushed out of the game like we would normally do, but they're still part of the grief journey. It is their journey as well. So we need to remember that while we grieve differently, Simon says this, but children grieve differently, like adults too. So we don't want to be pushed around and told what to do. And children are individuals too, who have a mind of their own and decide, no, mommy, I don't want to do this. No, mommy, I don't want to wear this dress. You know, sometimes you go into a funeral and say, okay, wear this dress. And you're thinking, okay, they probably should wear a nice soft color. And they decide they want orange and red. And you're like, oh my God, orange and red in a funeral. And, you know, it depends on if you're in a context. Like I grew up red. I guess in the modern day now, you see all kind of colors. But in early days as a child, it's black or white or some dark color. But to wear orange and red, you probably get away as a child. But just how parents think, say, oh, you could go in front with a red dress because they're going to say something about us. But remember, children are individuals too. They have their own taste and style. And so in grief, we have things that we want to do and we don't want to do. And we need to remember that we do not force our children to do things. We respect their wishes as well. And we ask, we could encourage, and we still support them when they differ from us. Mom and dad wishes. I think I want to end, close to the end with this one. I want mom to see me, or I want dad to see me. And what does that mean? It means to support me, to engage with me and engage in the grief journey. And I want to share one piece that I think will be pertinent to us as we process that, is how to talk with our children about grief. We're educating them. And I want to suggest to us that we do not wait until somebody dies before we start telling them about death and dying. It should be part of a journey that we share with them how important life is. And at some point in our journey, we're going to die. Now, of course, there are storybooks that we read all the time and nursery rhymes about Humpty Dumpty was on the wall and he fall down and they couldn't put him back together again, right? So they are reminders of easy ways we could ease them into the idea of death. And it's also an opportunity to teach them about our religious beliefs, about heaven, about God. So it's that opportunity we have, or whatever else is your interest or belief about death and so on. It's a good opportunity to say that at an early stage. And it's also important for us to say to children, we have a policy about how we're going to cope as a family. When one person cries, everybody not totally cries, but we support each other. We embrace. It says, rejoice with those who rejoice and mourn with those who mourn, or weep with those who weep. So if you cry by yourself, the rest of us might say, we go into the party next door. It's a reminder that you are different and we're going to support you today in your journey where you're at, because each member of the family will have a different view or different place where they're at that time. So that's important. When we talk to our children about death, it is important for us to use the word died and dead. Please don't use the word granny is sleeping, because at some point you expect granny to wake up, or grandpa to wake up, or sister to wake up, and if they're not waking up. And then the other thing is that children would not want to go to sleep, because if I go and sleep and I'm going to come back, because granny didn't come back, or grandpa didn't come back, or whoever it was didn't come back when they slept. So they are afraid of going to sleep. Whatever is a child's response, we should validate it. And they say, we're thinking like that. You're not supposed to think like that. No, this is what they're thinking at this time. What it does, it gives you insight into what is going on in their space, so you know how to support, what to talk about, what to encourage, what to dissuade. And interestingly, we have, if you observe now, we have the cell phone. And when somebody dies, because mommy and daddy occupied, the poor child get his cell phone. They never used to have it before, right? So they get it now, and we give it to them, and it's like, okay, this is a nice scratch. So they have it, and they hold on to it for a good while, and life continues. And when we are hoping to take it back from them now, they're like, no, this is how I was grieving at this time. This was my crutch. This is what I used to support myself and scroll all over the world and play all kind of stuff. So we need to remember that when we talk to our children about grief, we need to find and support them with meaningful and healthy ways of coping in the midst of the conversation. So we said, yes, you could watch TV for a little bit, but it can't be until 2 o'clock in the morning, because we're going to create an interest and an appetite. I know COVID did a lot to us and change our world, but there is some things like, TV turn off at this time, or this happens. Oh boy. During COVID, which is another form of grief and that whole journey itself, families change how they did stuff. Now your children just roll over from bed into school. Oh boy, it's quite a change. But imagine now you have to now navigate that with the changes that are being made. And so we need to realize that when we grieve, we are also growing and changing. Our worldview changes, our perspective changes, and sometimes we have to revisit them. So it's important for us to do that and to offer comfort to your child that suits them, not the comfort that you think you should give them. So for example, they perhaps don't want a hug. Well, please don't hug them if they don't want a hug and say, well, I want to hug you, I want to give you a kiss. No, you can't force how you think you should comfort them. Comfort them based on their needs, what makes them feel good. And make conversation about grief an ongoing experience. For example, before they go to a funeral, you might want to talk to them about what to expect, what could happen there. You will see people crying. Mommy might cry too, or daddy will cry, and stuff like that. And know that's how we feel about grandma or grandpa. And sometimes that's what happens when we feel sad. So it's important for us to talk about that and use age-appropriate books and stories to confirm or to remind them of some of the values and principles that you believe about death. And the next one says you're to love me. And love me means to listen to me. What's going on in my space? That's the L. And the O is to observe. Remember we said before that children play a lot. So for you to know what's going on in their space, to know what's happening, then we need to observe them. So we have to be around, right? And V, to validate. Validate their feelings or expressions of grief that they choose. I want to give grandma a rose. I don't want to put no rose in no coffin. Validate whatever they think they have and encourage them in the choices that they make, and encourage them to remember that grief is a journey. Unfortunately, it is not brief, but at some point, at some part of the journey, there's some measure of relief that helps us to feel better as we go along. And then the last one is to hug me. And hug, although some people don't like it, but children do like hugs too when they choose to have it. So H is to help. Help me, help your child through that journey. You understand. Understand me. Understand me means put yourself in my shoe, not thinking as an adult now of what you would prefer or what you would like, but understand that what my journey looks like. And G is to guide me. Children need guidance for everything that happens in their life, and grief is just another opportunity for us to guide them in terms of what we think would be helpful. Notice I didn't say it's not a Simon say command kind of thing. It is to guide. So it means you're the lead, or sometimes you nudge them along in a particular direction that you think would be helpful for them. And then it's important for us to go over into this slide. This final one talks about the grief circle. It's important to remember that sometimes as adults, if not most times as adults, we ourselves are struggling with our own grief and expression of it. So imagine now you have child or children that you now have to take care of. The grief circle gives us an opportunity to support each other, to comfort each other. It was first designed by psychologist Susan Silk, and her idea is a concentric circle. So as deep and as wide as you have your support base. So this particular one gives us an idea of what someone looks like, but yours could include church or resources that you have. So what it does is that you're getting comfort from outside. So the family or the person who is grieving gets all the comfort and support from outside. And then, notice, the dump out or the complaining or your grief stories is not being given by you or with you in the circle. You're giving them back out to the persons as they continue out into the end of the circle. So imagine now, sometimes we don't know what to say to people. If we practice having a circle like this, a grief circle like this, where I could lay up all my troubles, I could tell you everything, and you're not gonna come, what are you going on so for, girl? You should have done that. No. comfort comes in. And so when you tell somebody else, so I tell Luke, Luke now will tell his wife, because that's his support base, and his wife will say, okay, I'll talk to Pastor Dougie, and Pastor Dougie will say, okay, I will talk to Michelle or Mary, and so it continues out. So you're not being forced to hold up all of the pain that you would have experienced. So the comfort comes in, and your complaint goes out. So you don't have to process it and stress yourself. And it's important for us as parents to have that source so we can help our children. And they will say to us, Mommy or Daddy, use the grief circle. We have it. We could benefit as a family if we choose to use it. And I want to end by saying to us that children did not choose grief. Grief chose me. Just to remind you, of course, if you want to bring your child or any family member who's struggling with grief, New Creations Caribbean, you could call us at 708-6565. And we have a competent and pleasant administrator, Nicole, who will take your calls and help you find the best counselor to help you process your issues. So thank you very much. God bless you.
I was just texting my wife. I have some videos of Mommy and her interaction with Judah. Okay. And I was just texting my wife to jump on to listen to the session, because I said, probably we have underestimated what he misses. Okay. Because I'm seeing some of the things you have identified there. We went to Price Mart, and there's a little cheese in a red pack. They sell it in a big, it's like a net. Okay. I didn't want to get that cheese. It's a lot of cheese. No. But I remember that my mother, wherever she travels, to a hotel, anywhere, plane, all these little small packets of things, she saves it, she brings it back home. Okay. And that's her way of slipping him a little treat. Okay. Goes up to the room, and he's snacking with all these little things from hotels and da-da-da-da-da-da. Everything is... So when he asked me for the cheese, it's only now it hit me. Okay. It was a way for him to connect. So when you were sharing, I think there was a patience that she had for him to be wrong that I realized we don't have. Meaning, she allowed him to be wrong about something and listened intently and said, is that so? Wow. Really? And let him create and innovate and dream and all these things. Even though it was wrong, I think I quickly tried to tell him the right thing without the room. So I guess it's a journey as well for the parents. So we're both journeying through this.
Yep, that's for sure.
This thing called grief. One of the things when you were showing as far as, even though you brought it back with hug, I guess understanding, the Bible does give us an instruction about understanding when you get knowledge, because it kind of makes everything clear and plain. So what would you advise, because we have so many families being affected by death all the time. What would you advise for families after death? Should they take it on their own? Should somebody step up to try and talk with all the rest? Or do you recommend that Christian families come and do therapy?
Yeah, lots of questions. As I ended with the circle, that reminded us that we need people to comfort us, and we need the place for us to find where we could just dump how we feel on people who are not going to judge us. That's very important. So whether you choose it in therapy in terms of a formal setting, or you find persons and people who will help you do that, that is very useful. And it's a reminder for your children that even though you think, I don't want it, or you think you don't need it, is saying to them, hey, if you have this experience, you could go and talk to somebody about it. It might not be a therapist, it could be an auntie or whoever it is, but you don't have to grieve alone.
Mm-hmm.
That's important.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. I don't know if I could sneak in one more.
Yeah, sure.
Support for you at the time of death.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like the brain captures everybody who supported and those who you probably feel did not.
Okay.
Because we find that in death, some people, like, they don't know how to support.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it throws everybody off. You don't want to say the wrong thing, so sometimes you say nothing at all.
Mm-hmm.
But to the person who experienced the loss, sometimes saying nothing at all could feel like a lack of care. So for us who want to provide support to families or others or friends, family, co-workers, neighbors who might be experiencing loss, how would you guide someone, especially, amongst the household of faith, in showing support? Because sometimes it feels like we get numb in not knowing the right way, so sometimes we don't do anything at all.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that's I could hear somebody saying, oh, I normally say to people, support the way that you can, as the first thing. And secondly, what does the person need? And I think also the persons who are grieving should be mindful as well that people are taking cues from us as to what is important to us or what we think. So if you say, okay, we do not want it, we don't have any wake tonight, people ain't gonna come. Except maybe the same circle of people you have who kind of know you a little bit, they will kind of come to something like that. But they take cues from you and say, okay, probably we shouldn't do this, I don't want to do that. I wonder if. So they are very mindful of the other person. So it's like a balance you have to find to realize that, no, remember, I am the one grieving. What do I want people to do? If you could tell them, that would be very useful. It makes it easier. Of course, sometimes we don't, and they know of their own volition decide, okay, I think they need a pot of soup. And about 10 people bring 10 pots of soup, and like halfway going to spoil, right? So. Yes, and you're feeling guilty. Oh my God, how could we throw the people them soup? But it really went down the drain, huh? But just remember that this person was thinking of you in the best possible way. And the other side of it, the other person is also grieving. So I may not have been the wife, but I am a cousin or I'm a church member or whoever it is. So I am grieving myself, but just in different ways. So the same, and sometimes we think, oh my God, nobody called me and asked me anything. I am grieving too. So you have this sense of disenfranchisement because you think, I was grieving too, but I give over my grief to Luke because Luke is a son. So people struggle with trying to find out, like we talk about the rivalry, who's supposed to be in the first place, who should get the first hug or do the first thing, and we struggle with that. And people do experience pain after a loss, not because of the loss itself, but how people treated them or how they were treated after.
Yeah. Thank you so much for the contribution.
You're welcome.
I'm sure I'm going to talk about this session, so I'm sure we'd have to provide some either feedback or some level of support, because we always have so much that's happening in church around loss. So thank you again for your contribution, and God bless everyone who was a part of the session. Good evening and God bless.
Bye-bye.